plenty of general game out in front of the lodge, and then there's a black rhino. And we've got a beautiful journey of giraffe. And right now, the elephants are loving them at the moment. Morning everybody, we've just left the lodge and it is pumping already this morning. Plenty of general game out in front of the lodge, and then there's a black rhino. We're going to see if we can get a little bit closer and see if we can show you guys this amazing animal. It's not often that we see them out in the open, so I'm hoping it's going to stay out there and then we can have a quick glimpse of it. Decided to rather just pull back a little bit, so we've come to a little bit of high ground just because this black rhino was a little bit on edge this morning. Generally speaking, the animals that love the thicket areas, so catching one out in the open is a fantastic sight to have, but not always the most comfortable for them. So it's better for us to rather just pull back, give the animals some space, and then observe them from a distance, and then we can all just enjoy the sighting a little bit. So not every day it is as pumping as this. We've barely left that black rhino, popped over the hill, and we've got a beautiful journey of giraffe. And what is quite interesting to watch is this female up ahead of us is actually busy having a scratch on this bush. You'll notice how she uses it and she's positioned herself right up against it, and she's having a good old scratch this morning. Remember, these animals don't have fingers and opposable thumbs. They can't scratch themselves the conventional way, so it's always an apt bush around which is useful when they need to have a good scratch. So you'll notice that all of these young giraffe are hanging around together, and quite often what will happen is the females will disperse and leave the youngsters in a creche set up with one adult female in attendance, just to keep an eye out, because as big as these animals are, they are still vulnerable to attack from lions. Lions on the reserve do tend to favor giraffe at times, and these youngsters would be quite vulnerable. So something that's quite nice to see here is that with the herbivores, because there's no competition between these guys, you will quite often find that they're in attendance with one another. And it actually will assist them in the long run, because the more eyes and ears are around, the better chance of staying free of predators. So these impalas would be more than happy to graze and browse around these giraffes, because the giraffes are so much taller. Chances are very good that they're going to spot a predator long before the impalas will do, and the impalas will pick up on the body language as soon as these giraffes spot a predator, and then they'll also be a bit more alert. The show just keeps on rolling. So even though these aren't the big hairy scary animals, we've got a nice big herd of springbuck down here on the plains, happily busy grazing about at the moment. And then interspersed among them, there's one or two impalas, and then the bigger reddish antelope that you can see here are called red hartebeest. And again, like with the giraffes and the impalas that we saw earlier, it's quite fascinating to see how these species can intermingle with one another and not be competing too much for food with one another. And then if we pan across from here with these beautiful animals up here, and we look up onto our left-hand side, there's a nice big herd of elephants, and we're gonna head up a little bit closer and see if we can go and see them. So from down on the bottom of the valley there, we could see that there was a nice big herd of elephants. And Murphy's Law, we come up here and they've all disappeared into the thickets, except for this one male that's come out onto the road at the moment. But that's how it goes in safari, you know, it's never a guarantee. But that's what makes it so much more exciting, because you never know what's going to happen. One minute it might be busy and pumping, and the next it goes quiet, but then it gives you time to also appreciate the little things in life. There's a nice beautiful bush behind me here, which is called the speckboom, and right now the elephants are loving them at the moment. My words are barely cold, and right now he's tucking into that speckboom. Watching him eat that, I must say, I wouldn't mind having a little bit of speckboom myself. It's quite delicious. This time of the day, they're quite good to eat. So they use a slightly different method of photosynthesis, where they sequestrate a lot of the carbon out of the air at night time, and they capture it and bind it with the water. And so early in the mornings, just before the sunlight hits them and they can start hyper-photosynthesizing, actually quite nice and tart, because the carbon and the hydrogen molecules that have been combined overnight forms an acid compound called crassulatic acid, and it gives it this lovely tart, almost like a green apple taste to it. Later on in the day, as it has been photosynthesizing and using up all this crassulatic acid, and then it becomes a little bit bitter, but this time of the day it's quite delicious to eat. Definitely something to try on your next safari. So we've just come across a beautiful white rhino female with a young calf. And what's quite interesting, now that we've seen both species of rhino today, from a behavioral perspective, it was quite nice to see how with the white rhinos you would have noticed that the baby walks in front, and even though we didn't see a baby black rhino, with them the baby tends to follow behind the mom. And it has to do with the general habitats that these animals tend to live in. So with white rhinos, the mom lets the babies go out front because they tend to live in more open terrain, so she can see if there's any danger up ahead. Whereas with the black rhinos, because they tend to spend most of their time in the thickets, it's best that the baby follows behind mom for two reasons. Number one, quite often the bush is quite dense and mom needs to literally clear a path for the little one to follow. And secondly, she doesn't know what's around the next bush. So then it is better that the baby follows behind mom so that the bodyguard is up ahead and the little one can follow behind her. So nice, nice to see that interactive behavior from these animals. So here we've got a beautiful herd of Cape eland, and these are actually one of the largest species of antelope that we find in South Africa. Females will probably weigh around 400 or so kilograms, whereas the big males can go anywhere upwards of a ton in weight. So definitely very, very large antelope. Normally an antelope that's a little bit more skittish and tends to give you a little bit more space. This morning they're just loving all this fresh green growth around, so they're lapping up the bounty that's around at the moment. Also, we've got a beautiful dazzle of zebra. Something quintessential about safaris. I mean, you can't make it a complete one without seeing some zebras. Now, you'll notice that these guys are very busy feeding at the moment, so they are actually hindgut fermenters, unlike the other animals, meaning that they have to eat much larger quantities of grass in order to get the nutrients necessary. It's been a fantastic morning, a little short bumble this morning just to try and see what we can find for game drive today. and I think we've been quite successful. We've had beautiful sightings of both black and white rhinos, lots of lovely elephants, and then unfortunately the cats evaded us today, but next time hopefully. But very, very happy with what we've managed to find this morning. Thanks for joining us, and hope to see you again soon.